All right, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, we are back for another Bokeh Podcast episode. Brand new guest today, Ashley Baumgartner. Thank you so much for hanging out with me. We were just kind of freely chatting before I hit the record button. Fellow podcaster and obvious conversationalist. I think we're going to have a lot of fun today, but you're also a photographer. And we're going to be talking about client experience, more specifically helping clients feel comfortable in front of the camera, right?
Yes, definitely. One of my favorite things. Thanks so much for having me here today.
I'm glad to have you here. We're just going to jump right in because we have a really fun topic to get to here in just a bit. But as we normally do here at the podcast, a few questions that I usually ask my guests that come on. The first one having to do with client experience. We're going to be talking about comfort level in front of the camera in a bit. But is there another principle, big idea that has enabled you to provide a really great customer experience for your clients?
Yeah, I am just really big on uplifting communication. I think having an extra positive spin is so important when working with clients.
Is that like extra emojis on the end of a text or something like that?
I mean, if it's like an Instagram story reply, maybe.
Okay.
Actually, I am a huge email person, and I am one of those people where I think your email needs to be so fluffy. I like to call them fluffy emails.
Yes.
And it's one of those things that I think a lot of people skip over. In the sake of time or just in the sake of that's not how they were trained to write an email, whether that's the corporate world they were in at one point or anything like that. So my goal is always to leave them with something, kind of like a positive sandwich almost. You know, you hear like the compliment or like the constructive criticism sandwich. So like it goes so far to start your email with like, I hope you're having a great week, or I hope your day is great. Like most people just jump straight to the thing that they need or the thing they want to discuss. And like literally those sentences make such a difference. And so I do that in every type of communication, whether that's a text to the client, an email, information I'm sending them, even just like scheduling appointment related things. And I think that just goes a long way in the customer service world.
I 100% agree. I'm enough of a dork that not only do I do very similar things to what you're talking about, but I will like even when I'm writing a text message, if it has a happy feel to it, you literally, like if somebody was watching me send a text message, they see me start to smile. Yeah. It's almost like I'm trying to like imbue this emotion, this deep emotion into the text message that I'm sending, so it comes across more genuine or something. You know, it's a funny thing. But I've done this very thing with my customer service team for years now. We talk about the feel that you portray through the emails, because it really, you're right, it can make an absolute difference to that person's day if you don't just jump right in, uber formal, uptight, kind of professional in air quotes, that you do make it a little bit more personal. You actually feel like you're talking to another human being that actually cares.
Yes. Yeah, I am totally that person that reads into everything way too much. So like when you get those text messages where someone just uses a period every sentence and you're like, are they mad at me? Did I do something wrong? Like, why are we not on good terms?
Are they depressed? Yeah. Like,
yes. Are they upset? Should I be upset? Like, so I want to take into account that I might have clients like that. So they're going to know I'm happy. They're going to know I'm positive. They're going to know I think everything relating to their session or their wedding is happy and positive. I have to go back through and take out exclamation marks because I tend to end every
We're
sentence
twins.
with
Yes,
that. Yes,
I get it.
So I have to dial back the enthusiasm occasionally, but
we actually literally, I mean, it's so funny that you're talking about this because it's so similar. I actually I had to go back to my team just not very long ago, actually. And I was like, you know what, we're going to have to cut back a little bit on the exclamation points because I had tried to communicate this idea of expressing emotion through the emails so much. And they had seen me use exclamation points so much that it became a thing. And I was like, okay, we have to cut back just a little bit in the copy in the email or the copy on the website. Like we can't use so many exclamation points. That's great. I totally get you. And I think our tendency to read into emails or text messages or whatever, problematic though it may be, it at least makes us more empathetic to the experience that the person on the other side has. And, you know, empathy really is everything. I think if this desire for a positivity, it might come off trite to some people, but those people may not be making a genuine effort. Like if it actually comes from our heart, I think even something like a text message or an email can be felt in one way or another, if the person's open to it anyway. And I think it's a great way to start this conversation. I'm a huge fan already, Ashley. Let's keep going. Let's talk about brand position, because you are a wedding photographer and in a pretty crowded market too. I mean, Sacramento, Bay Area.
Yes.
So how do you create distinction for yourself amidst that kind of large mass of photographers. What is your brand position?
Yeah, so I kind of like to think that I'm slowly building my own little niche here,
Okay.
but my goal is to capture very joyful, timeless images for my clients. So the intersection of the really happy, giggly, joyful photos, but in the more timeless, beautiful, artistic way. So I do shoot film. And so I'm trying to merge those two together with a little bit of flair of I am a big color lover.
Okay.
And so I am doing as much as I can to attract those really colorful brides. And it's getting to that point where I am getting brides who are loving that, which I love. So my goal, is just to really create and craft really joyful and timeless photos with an attention to detail. And that comes into play of I actually entered the industry as a wedding calligrapher. So that's actually how I started my business. Still do a little calligraphy, but I really feel like that's helped me hone my attention to detail in terms of whether that's flat lace styling, just details and little intricate moments at a session or throughout the wedding day as well.
So I'm curious about this because this is something that I've actually discussed on the podcast, particularly in brand position consultations that I do. Joyful. First of all, to be very clear, the idea that you're speaking about this topic of joy or speaking to it, the significance of it in relation to your photography, knowing you and having a conversation with you, even just for a few minutes, I'm like, oh my word, that's totally Ashley. That makes sense.
Yes, trying to stay true to self.
Yeah, but at the same time, I am curious if you have a perspective on this. Using the word joyful has become a really popular thing on photographers' websites for whatever reason.
It is a buzzword now.
And I don't know can you explain that? I don't know what it's about. Like, because a brand position statement, for example, one of the ways to look at it is, okay, if I stand for something, then that means I stand against something, right? So for example, if I am a photographer that photographs joyful weddings, then I would be suggesting that there are weddings out there that are not joyful. So when a photographer talks about this, what do you think, like, where does this popularity of this word come from?
Yeah, I know. It's funny you said that. It has really become a buzzword in the industry lately, which is like, you want to like toot your own horn and be like, I was saying it before that. But
Of course.
But at the end of the day, like I explain it to my couples during our consultations that I will capture I want to capture the true joy of the day. So that is where my focus is to capture the emotion of the people around you. And 9 out of 10 times, that's going to be joy, hopefully.
Yeah.
And second is that I am not going to, as a photographer, you help construct moments throughout the day, right? You help prompt, you help facilitate things to happen, whether that's a first look or just like giving them a moment as husband and wife, your bridesmaids, your groomsmen. I tell my couples joyful because those are the moments I want to help them create and then create a photograph around that. Okay. Because there are photographers who their whole thing is they want the really romantic, intimate moments. And I tell my couples you'll still have a little bit of that. Interesting. Where they have the really like artistic in terms of like
almost like a magazine shoot kind of.
Yes, a magazine. I couldn't think of the word. Like something very like editorial. And again, I love the editorial look as a film photographer too. And I think there's a time and a place. But on a wedding day, I'm there to really capture the main emotion, which deep in my heart, I'm hoping is joy. So I am there to help them construct situations so we get the photographs that capture that emotion. And that I'm not prompting them to do a lot of really serious things, really moody things, really emotional things, really like their bridesmaids and their groomsmen. Like I want those photos to exude joy as well, because those people are so joyful to be there for their best friend or their sister or their brother or anything like that too. So that's at least why I stay joyful. I can't necessarily speak to the market as a whole in that aspect, but
I was just curious because I've just seen that word popping up so much. And I don't know if there was like a so-called celebrity photographer at some point in the last 3 or 4 years that started using that. And so everybody's like, oh, I need to use that word too. Again, in my mind, like I get a chance to connect with you and I'm like, oh my word. Yeah, totally joyful. Like playing on that idea in some way makes sense as a reflection of your personality. I guess the only caveat would be if there are like 5 other photographers also saying the same thing in the market, it'd be a bit of a challenge, but it makes sense. It is an actual reflection of you. Whereas it seems like the other photographers, in some cases, maybe are just doing it because it's the thing to say, or because so-and-so did it. And so they're just kind of copying and pasting. I'm not sure.
I know, thinking back, you know, who I think has, and they're amazing photographers, and I've taken all their courses, is Amy and Jordan. And like, you look at Amy and it is joy. Like she is just a joyful person.
Just
I
like
wish I could be that joyful all the time.
Yes.
But thinking back, I think in their course, they talk about their brand words and kind of, and I feel like joyful, I'll have to look back. I think joyful is one of them. And so I know they have just really blown up in the sense of education and having so many photographer communities they've reached. And so that could be a route.
That's, and whether that's the case or not, it also brings up a really good point when it comes to brand position, which is like, look at other successful photographers. Amy and Jordan have done really well for themselves on multiple levels. Look at what they are doing and learn from them, but just make sure not to copy and paste, because you see photographers doing that. They're like, oh, I like so-and-so. And so you just kind of see, their website becomes some version of that photographer's website.
Yes.
And
definitely.
That's not helping you build a business as effectively as you could. In contrast, looking at the local market, seeing what other photographers are saying, and then going a different direction for the sake of distinction is a much better way to go about creating a brand that's going to actually draw in a very specific clientele and enable you to build a business more efficiently. So and this has been fun. I appreciate your perspective too. And I want to keep going though. Talk to me about time. I mean, I know that being a business owner, you're married as well, like juggling all the things, and then of course relationships with other family and friends, it can be a lot at times. How do you effectively manage all of that and still have time for yourself for the important relationships in your life?
You know, I will say probably up until about a year ago, I was really bad at it.
Oh, really? Okay.
And I won't say I'm great at it now. But I just did a lot of little changes is really the best answer for that.
Okay.
I mean, I know everyone talks about it, but batching is a really huge thing of just being ultra focused on one task and not, airplane taking off, airplane coming back down, not having to refocus constantly.
Yep.
I am one of those people, my notifications are turned off on my phone. I get text notifications, but I don't get any other notifications that pop up on my screen at any time because I am totally distractible. I will say that.
99% of us are. And so like, kudos to you for doing that. More of us need to take that cue, because I think it's so much more a healthy way to exist.
Yeah. I am also that person. Like, I get up and I get ready in the morning, even though we're sheltering in place now. Like, I'm still up and showered. My husband's a teacher, so he has a very rigid schedule until now, but he had a very rigid schedule. And so we are get up, get ready for the day, really helps you get moving kind of person. And then I actually worked with a coach last year. Kind of, I don't want to say life coach. It's not, she calls herself a self-care coach.
Okay.
But really, she has just instilled a lot of those properties and a few other things into me of just like, we can't continue to pour out our cup if we don't fill our own. So just really encouraging. I used to try to block like one day off a week on my calendar to take time off and rest. Like, I don't do sessions on Sundays anymore, because if I had a wedding, I am just not the best version of myself that following day.
Yes.
And need to see my husband if he's at teaching all week, and he's a first year teacher. So he's in his classroom until 8 p.m. most nights.
Yeah.
So really having that dedicated time of just having better boundaries is probably the best overarching answer of saying no when you can, or just saying not right now when you can, and just putting like kind of hard and fast rules in there, like no notifications, no, getting ready for the day. No, yes, getting ready for the day. No sessions on Sundays, things like that.
No, that's good. And really, a lot of the times it does come back to the basics. We just need to actually do them, right? Like we kind of know the things that we should be doing. We don't necessarily do them. It's actually doing them, and doing them consistently too, even if it's small things. It really does make a big difference. Just a little bit of context too, for anybody who may be listening to this in a month or 6 months or a year from now or whenever it might be. Ashley mentioned the shelter in place. Of course, we're dealing at the moment with the fallout from the coronavirus, and many, if not most at this point, are spending the majority of their time at home. And so, the way that we manage time has probably shifted, even just slightly, if not dramatically in some cases.
Trying to figure out the new normal, but we're doing it.
But I love the fact that even through that, you're, for the most part anyway, you're like you said, you're getting up in the morning, you're starting off the day, and there is something about consistency and rhythm and kind of following through on those habits, that really does make a big difference. It can be encouraging, even kind of invigorating as well. So that's a great recommendation. Yeah. Let's talk about, I mean, speaking of time management, we talk a lot about the idea of delegation or outsourcing here on the podcast. Yes. What does that look like for you, or have you experimented with that in your businesses?
Yeah, I will say if you can do it, it is game changing. So I do outsource my editing. I am kind of an anti-photographer in the way of like, if I could take a photo and never touch it again, I would be so happy.
Yes, I can relate.
Editing, culling, editing, file backing up. Yeah. None of that is like my expertise, or I love the business side of being a photographer more than the photography side.
Yeah.
And so I just, once I started out, I've been outsourcing my editing for a year and a half, and it has just been so much nicer. I love that. And then I outsource like my taxes, anything that I know someone is better trained at than I am, or I don't have a desire to learn, I will try to do it.
Yeah.
And taxes was another one where I was like, I would rather not mess that up because it's not fun when you do, from past experience. And I will say too, like in my business, my photography business, I outsource, like I like to call it outsourcing, but outsource to apps per se. So like I use Planoly. I try to plan a week at a time. I use Tailwind for Pinterest. Yeah. I have Dubsado to handle workflows and email,
automation, right?
Yes, automation, as much as I'm still diving even more into that, but as much as I have in the past. And then something we're going to talk about is I'm in the process of launching a podcast. And so we are out with another photographer, and we are outsourcing the podcast editing, the show notes, the mixing of the musical intros and outros. And although we have time, quote unquote, right now, it is just not our area of expertise. And we know that. And I want to respect that and not add extra stress to our lives if we don't need to. So just really finding ways to do that. I know though, just outsourcing the editing was by far the biggest time saver and just relief saver. I internalize a lot of my stress. So if I'm thinking that I have a wedding due, I can't focus on a lot of other things, even if that's what I need to be focusing on. So just knowing it's in someone that I really trust hands to do my work justice has just been such a relief.
Well, and part of it is expertise. I think the other part that can't be missed is what we could be doing with that time that would better serve our business. And I know that this is not necessarily a new concept, maybe to at least some of our listeners, but the reality is I think most photographers still don't actually apply it consistently, right? I understand, like I even enjoy editing. It's fun to apply a Lightroom preset to an image and see it change and then tweak it and adjust it and make it look really cool. Like I get that, but then what could I be doing with my time? And you know what, in fact, do a little bit of it for fun. That's great if you enjoy it. But the majority of it, whether it's editing or album design or accounting work or any of these other things, if you can hand those over to somebody else who can do, even 85 or 90% what you do, so that you can focus your time on the brand and ultimately building that brand, then you absolutely should be delegating or outsourcing that work elsewhere.
So true.
So expertise is important, but it's also important to consider how we're best spending our time for the sake of our business. And I think that's really great. I mean, you're doing that, even the podcast, like you said, you have time right now, you could be editing it, but instead you can work on finishing out the website or,
marketing it or
marketing or doing interviews or whatever it might be, but you can actually work on producing the brand versus having to do the busy work behind the scenes.
Yeah, I will say a lot of what we just talked about too with time management is like those boundaries have been very eye-opening this year of like, I'm saying no so I can do something else in that same time to whatever I'm saying no to. And that other thing could bring so much more value either in the short term or in the long term, which is, I am definitely an instant gratification person. So thinking longer term is a little bit harder for me, but just thinking like what is going to better serve my business, my clients, my family, all of those things. And that's not me up at 2 a.m. trying to edit photos that I'll probably need to re-edit tomorrow because the lighting was terrible at 2 a.m. and I was tired and all of that. So very grateful for the things we have been able to outsource so far.
That's great. Well, and I think you kind of summed that up brilliantly. What is, let's talk about inspiration. This is kind of a catchphrase, or not a phrase, but really kind of almost a cliche word these days. But the reality is, I think it's nice for all of us in some way to find inspiration, encouragement, maybe education through various sources. And I think ideally not just in the photography industry. So do you find inspiration through other sources outside of our kind of bubble that we live in?
Yeah, I definitely have a few. I won't say I'm someone that's like super artistically inspired by anything specifically, but I was this nerdy middle schooler that actually loved weddings, like, and had a Martha Stewart subscription magazine.
Oh, wow.
Subscription in like the 6th grade. So I have had this deep, deep love for bridal fashion, which is not something I've really leaned into until about this year recently.
Okay.
But I actually draw, and I'm not looking like necessarily at the photography when I'm looking for it. I'm just looking at like the art, the creation that like the fashion designer created. So that's been a big one. And then also because I came from calligraphy, I have just like always drawn a lot of inspiration from the beautiful art that a lot of the amazing wedding stationers and artists, whether it's a watercolor artist or anything like that, has created for weddings. So in weddings, that's in that world, that's kind of where I draw some of my inspiration. And then outside of it is I also have had the pleasure of being in a mastermind the last 2.5 years with 5 local ladies who none of them are in the wedding or photography or anything like that industries. They're all in very different industries. And that has been incredibly inspiring just to learn how other people run their businesses, what they go through, what's happening in their industry. So learning from them, because I think I mentioned earlier, I love the business side of running a business. Yeah. That's actually my favorite part, besides my clients, who are amazing. And I love like business books. I love all of that. I'm more interested in that than I do a lot of photography education too, just because I want to stay on my game and up to date on what's working in our industry. But I just love the business side. So business podcasts, business books, like the business mastermind I've been in has just been so valuable as well, and inspiring me to grow and expand and change up my business when things get a little stale too.
Well, and really with that mastermind in particular, we're talking about expanding perspective by getting other people's take on something that isn't just visual, right? And perspective really is everything. I mean, what I've been able to gain personally, just as an individual in the last, let's say 7 or 8 years or so, perspective wise about life in general, has just made a massive shift for me personally and professionally ultimately. But continuing to make a proactive effort to gain that perspective, somebody else's perspective, I think is really great. It's a good encouragement for all of our listeners. So look for those opportunities, whether it's on Facebook or more ideally, at least when we have the opportunity again to get out in person, to connect in person with groups of business owners so that you can learn from them. Great suggestion.
Yeah.
What about, speaking of inspiration, education, books? So do you have a favorite self-help book or business book that you can recommend to our listeners?
I know it's been said quite a few times on the Bokeh podcast, but 168 Hours by Laura Vanderkam definitely was game-changing for me. And for my husband, just to learn how much we over and underestimate certain things in our minds. My husband was so crazy to me, just that, we say we work more than we do, which is probably true. We think we take less free time than we think we have less free time than we truly do, just because of how we're spending our time. And just, she challenges you to do the time logs. And so every so often I make myself do it again. And I'm like, oh, I just spent 45 minutes scrolling Instagram, probably not the most productive thing I did today, or I put on a show at lunch, just to have something sound like a Netflix show on at lunch, and it's been an hour and a half and it's still on and I have not returned to my desk yet, or things, which I am sounding like a bad business owner now, but it happens occasionally to everyone.
Sure, of course.
So I just love that book. I think it was incredibly eye-opening, and just to have someone really call us out on something that I think a lot of us do, and just prove to us that we do have time. We do have time to do something we want to do. We do have time to make changes in our business. And just like she really talks about, it's not that you don't have time, it's just that it's not a priority.
100%. That sums it up beautifully, because the number of times that I've heard from photographers that they're, quote, busy, or just people in general, personal or professional world, I'm busy. What does that mean? You just did, you just spent how many hours on Facebook today? And you just went and did this thing and that thing. You just posted on social media. You did this other thing, but you're busy. Be honest with me. Like, tell me you don't want to hang out with me, or you don't want to go to this meeting, and here are the reasons why, or, like, be honest, but don't say you're busy. That's just a cop out. And frankly, not even that honest many times, either with me or with yourself, so be honest. But I love that you point that out. We do have more time in a day, in a week, than we are acknowledging, or at the very least, we could be using that time more efficiently. I mean, Tim Ferriss's book, The 4-Hour Work Week, has gotten a lot of bad rap for being, I think, kind of idealistic and simplistic. How in the world could you run a business in 4 hours? By the way, it can be done. I did it. But that being said, what he was really trying to get at was you should learn to use your time more efficiently. So you do have a limited amount of time. How are you using that? And there are ways like delegation and automation that can enable us to use that time more efficiently. It's good to highlight that. So we'll link to that book in the show notes, bokehpodcast.com. And for anybody listening, if you haven't checked it out yet, Haley put together a really cool resource at bokehbookshelf.com, which is like a collection of the most popular book recommendations on the podcast. So go check that out as well. Let's actually jump into our main topic, though, Ashley. And this is a really fun one because, and actually, I'm kind of curious to get your take on this. I think I brought this up maybe in an interview yesterday, but there's this ad that's playing for a masterclass with Annie Leibovitz that is I've seen on Facebook, and it's this quick clip, and she's saying, photographers say that you should. It's on you as the photographer to make the client comfortable, or the subject in front of the camera comfortable. I don't believe that. And it's just this quick clip, so you don't really have context to the conversation at hand. But it was interesting to me because on one side, I can understand, especially with Annie and some of the celebrities that she photographs, she's trying to capture this persona or this personality that maybe is behind the facade that this particular celebrity is normally portraying. And so if they're uncomfortable in front of the camera, maybe we're going to get to see a side of them that we don't normally. If that's the goal and there's actual reason to do that, I get it. But for us as wedding and portrait photographers, helping a client feel comfortable in front of the camera means that the images that we get are likely going to be that much better. Wouldn't you say?
Definitely. 100%. And I think that it is our response. I mean, I don't want to go against her. She's
do it. I got your back.
I think a large percentage of it is our responsibility. And I think a large percentage of what our clients are hiring us for is that, is the experience. And the experience is being comfortable and enjoying the session and everything leading up to it and everything after. So I really believe that it is our customer service duty as photographers. It is our relational duty as people trying to have, a good relationship with their clients. And I mean, I'm here to build a community. I want to build a community with my clients. And so that's not going to go well if they're not comfortable or they don't enjoy it.
Right.
And I don't know if it's from something, but it's said a lot in our industry too. Like, our clients are going to attach their experience to how much they like the photos. And if they didn't enjoy the experience, that may come through in their, opinions of the final product. And
100%.
I'm an Enneagram 2, which means I love positive encouragement and praise.
You positivity? What?
I know. It means I need a lot of positive reinforcement. And so one of my goals is that
you're doing a great job, by the way. It's been a good interview. Okay.
Whenever I tell people that, they always do that. You're doing good. Thank you. I do. I think a lot of it is our responsibility. I mean, and then the times where it is the client's responsibility, it's still my responsibility to help educate them, to get them to make good decisions. So the part that is their part is they're prepared prepared to do what they need to do.
Yeah.
So when it comes to making them feel comfortable in front of the camera, I kind of have 4 main things that I think contributes to that. And 2 of them are actually way before we even get to the session.
Okay, cool.
And so I know it seems a little contradictory of getting them comfortable in front of the camera, but 2 of the 4 happen long before they ever arrive wherever we're going to photograph or arrive on their wedding day or whatever that looks like. And so the first one is kind of what we talked about at the beginning, which is the encouraging, empathetic, uplifting communication, those great emails that we talked about. I think being positive from the start really sets the tone of what your relationship with them is going to look like, what your customer service relationship with them is going to look like, and just what all of your interactions with them are going to look like. It really starts the trust ladder of building trust with them. They're getting to know you. They're getting to know what the experience is going to look and feel like. if I sent them a harsh email, but then showed up really bubbly, there'd be this disconnect of like,
right.
which person are you? Which I totally get. Again, we talked about with text messages and all of that. Like some people do text that way and that's not how they are in person
right.
or anything like that. But I don't want them to have any of those moments of doubt that I get about those kind of text messages. So I want to save them from that if they are an Enneagram 2 or anything like that, like me. I think 4s are like that too. But so I really focused a lot on how I'm communicating with them beforehand and what positive things I'm putting on that. And part of that is also positive resources. So like I'm sending them a style guide. I'm sending them a locations guide to help them pick out a location or brainstorm. I'm helping answer any questions they have. I'm trying to be as clear as possible when it comes to scheduling or meeting or how to get in contact with me or all of that. So I think the really positive communication leading up to it through the whole experience is super important, whether that's the pricing guide or the investment guide when they first inquire, our consultation, if it's like a wedding couple and we're talking before their wedding day or before any session we do together or anything like that. The second one, then this is a little off to left field, but the second one before the session is really personal branding, which I feel like, again, is one of those things where some people would be like, how is this connected? But I think having a really personable brand helps your clients be more comfortable in front of the camera because they're more comfortable around you. So I am someone where like, if you follow along, and again, things are a little different right now based on how the world is. But if you follow along, like a lot of my clients, they're going to know what I look like before I show up at a session because they've seen my face either on Insta stories or in the feed, which is very hard for a lot of photographers. And I did not put myself in the feed for a long time. So I get that. And they are going to know what my voice sounds like because we've talked on the phone or on FaceTime, or they've listened to me talk on stories. Which means they're probably going to know some of my demeanor too. Like I'm talking on Instagram stories like we're talking now. I'm talking like I would be as if I'm having a conversation, which means you're not just showing up and having a session with some girl you never met, right? And even if we didn't have the chance to connect on FaceTime before, like say it's just a family session, but if they followed along on my website, on my Instagram, they've either read my voice, I don't know if that's quote unquote, but my voice, or they've read or listened to something that gives them a little indication of my personality, my demeanor, how I'm going to act, how I'm going to communicate around them. And they're going to know fun facts about me because I am not shy in sharing little things about day-to-day life, little things about me. And my whole goal with that is not just to talk about myself. I like to talk, but I don't necessarily love to talk about myself, but it is just to get them to have potentially some connection point. Because again, the more people will be more comfortable around you if they feel like they have something in common with you, if they feel like they have something to talk about with you. And it's crazy now to the point where like I get clients who have something so specific in common with me that they feel bonded to me before we've even talked, which is so fun. So one example is I have a pet rabbit. I have a bunny, and I had a wedding couple last year who booked me because they also had a pet bunny and they loved that I shared the pet bunny. Their bunny was a part of their wedding day, which I loved. We did engagement photos with their bunny. So sweet. Christina and Tony, I love them. But I just love that bonded them to me before, like, I think they wrote it in their inquiry email. They were like, we saw your bunny. We have a bunny too. Like I think I have on my website where I went to college because that's where I met my husband, and I get couples write in and they're like, we went to that school too. Like that's where we met. Just having something that they feel connected to before you get to a session, I feel like really helps them feel like they know, whether they know you more than we've actually talked, or they have something to talk to you about when we get to the session as well. And I try to do my homework too, so that I have something to talk to them about, but if we have that in common as well.
I'm curious though, what do you think? So, I mean, it's really interesting to me that the client booked you largely anyway, because you shared a similar pet.
Yes.
They wouldn't know that obviously unless you're sharing that. But I think at the same time, our industry has gone in this direction. A lot of photographers spend so much time. I mean, even on the homepage of their website, talking about themselves and their favorite food and this thing and that. And like, are you a photographer? Or are you just there to talk about yourself? Like,
are you
there to take care of the client?
You...
Yeah. Like what is, so I feel like we've gone to an extreme. I get that the motivation behind it, well, at least I think it is largely rooted in a great place, which is let's be, as you're saying, more personal or personable. But where is the balance between that and then also just making sure that we're, first of all, here to serve the client as a photographer. And if we're going to spend time writing copy for our website, let's focus first on how we serve that client. At least that's the direction that I tend to lean. But what are your thoughts on the balance between those things?
Yeah, I totally agree. It is a balance. I think some people get overwhelmed and think that I'm suggesting that they just need to share every part of their life and do it right away and do it always. And that's definitely not the case.
Yeah.
I will say I agree with you. Sometimes when you open a website and you're like, is that the photographer? Is that a client they've shot? Who are we looking at? I again, my hope is also that it's there to serve them and get that connection point.
Right.
Yeah. My clients always know that that's why I'm there. I'm there for them. And that is communicated through language on my website. That's communicated through telling the stories of my couples on social media. That's through all of that. I really see it as just letting someone into snippets of your life. So It's a balance. My platform is not there for me to tell them all about them. My platform is to show off beautiful pictures of them, hopefully communicate with future couples, and then let all of those people into special little snippets of my life. I do say I probably do a lot more than some people in that generally I write a lot of things that I want to communicate to them. So I'm a big believer in your caption does not have to be about what your photo is, like on Instagram or anything like that. So I will write a lot of personal captions. It's just what works for me, though. I don't think that everyone needs to do that. But I think at the end of the day, those little captions, like my clients respond. My clients respond. They respond to something I'm talking about. Okay. They respond to a question I'm asking. And I feel like it just feels like this nice, long, continual coffee conversation with them where I'm telling a story and they're having something to relate to and we're getting to know each other better by the time we get to the wedding day, or whoever's following along might not be engaging in the conversation, but they're still seeing it and it's still in the back of their mind that there is some sort of connection point.
Yeah. Well, I think, even in your Instagram feed, I had to scroll down a little ways to even find a post about your bunny. So it's not like you're constantly talking about your bunny, for example.
Yeah. Or he is on my stories a lot.
And yeah, sure. But that's a great thing about stories too, is you can kind of post anything there and it's there for a little bit and then it goes away. So, but it seems as though you've struck a good balance, and the fact that clients are actually responding speaks to the benefit of being that personal. I know that I bring this up quite a bit in the podcast episodes. I don't want anybody listening in to think that I'm suggesting minimizing the personal element of our engagement with our clients, because I'm the first person to want to connect with somebody and have a great conversation. And I'm kind of an open book too. I'll pretty much just like blurt out anything if given the opportunity. But at the same time, we should be prioritizing serving the clients, number one. And I know I mentioned it ad nauseum at this point, but Donald Miller, Building a Story Brand, this book talks about the significance of making the client the hero. That's what we need to be doing first. And then, yes, there's opportunity to connect on a personal level, and you're doing that very thing, and obviously well enough that you're even booking clients from it. So that's pretty exciting too. Coming back though to helping clients feel comfortable. So the first two steps, and I was taking notes as you were talking, the first two steps we could almost like put under the umbrella of setting a tone, right? Like you're setting the tone with positive messaging, number one, and then you're setting the tone with a personal or personable brand or branding, the way that you're interacting with your clients. That's even before you're in front of the camera. But then there are a couple of other principles I know you're going to bring up. And is this more relevant to when you're actually standing in front of the client with a camera?
Yes, definitely.
Okay.
So one of the two is actually kind of carrying on from the earlier one, the pre-session ones, and that is constant communication. Yes. So nobody likes an awkward silence. No. Let's be real here. Like nobody, there are a few people that love peace and solitude and quiet, and I wish I was one of them. But I am one of those people who needs noise, with the exception of a few specific activities where I need quiet to focus or write or anything like that. But I love sound. Like I said, I'm a 2. I love positive reinforcement. I love just having a conversation. And so that positive communication that we've had before the session is going to start the second that they arrive in person. So that's greeting them positively, that's connecting with them, that's talking to them about how their day was leading up to the session, that's affirming their outfit choices, affirming this location, affirming that the light is going to look, the light looks great, affirming that they're going to get great photos out of this. It's really continuing that exclamation mark based email communication in person. Okay. And now they're getting to live it out in person. So, and that builds that trust again, because again, my in-person demeanor is matching all of the emails I've sent before, all of the communication we've had before that, especially if I haven't talked to them on the phone or met them yet. It is just reaffirming that and continually building trust. And I mean, everyone likes to hear that they look good. Like, let's be real.
It's true. Well, I mean, back to How to Win Friends and Influence People, that classic book by Dale Carnegie. He talks about not just, I guess, the general overarching idea of focusing on the other person, helping them feel important, but even calling them by their name. I mean, if
I was going to say, he talks about their name. Yep.
Yeah, you're photographing them, calling them by name, but you're so right about this. Giving affirmation consistently throughout and not just letting them hear that click, 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 or maybe a lack of click, especially if you're mirrorless, but like where there's little to no interaction. Now they're standing there and they're like, is he even or she even photographing me, or what? Like, am I doing it wrong or right? And you leave them insecure. And that's the last thing that you want if you want them feeling comfortable and ultimately emotive in front of the camera. So that's a great recommendation, great reminder.
Yeah. And I will say, like, it's a learning curve. It takes time to get to that point where you feel comfortable talking that much. Like, I'm pretty much talking through the whole session. I will say I had to relearn it, not recently, but in the last couple of years when I integrated film into my work, because that takes time. Like, I'm stopping to roll film, and I realized that I was being quiet, like, while I was doing it. And because I'm thinking about the film, I'm thinking about the next shot, I'm thinking about, I have 16 shots until I need to change it again. And I realized I was internally thinking a lot and I was leaving it quiet. And so I kind of had to relearn, I want to call it a workflow, but just kind of the experience workflow a little bit again on I need to keep talking, I need to keep engaging in conversation with them, keeping them reaffirmed, keeping them up to date on what I'm thinking about doing next, or if we're going to move locations, if we need to change outfits. So really just that continual conversation, I think, goes a long way. My favorite thing is when we get to the end of the session and the groom is like, that wasn't that bad.
Yeah,
like 100%. That is the highest praise you could get from a groom who had no interest, or a dad at a family session, or whoever spouse it was that was not excited to take photos, or whatever kid or teenager or anything that was not excited to do photos, or groomsman or bridesmaid or anything, when they were like, that wasn't that bad. I'm like, that is the highest praise possible. I used to, internalize it as a tune and be like, they said the word bad. Like, and I'm like, no. That is a great thing.
That's a good thing. And part of that comes from working efficiently. And part of working efficiently, I mean, it really does require, in this context, communication, consistent communication, because it not only helps manage the client's expectations, but ultimately, most of these people aren't models. You can't expect them to just do the thing. And you're like, and it kills me when photographers are like, just act happy, or some variation of that, or just, be like you would at home, without any kind of specific instruction that helps guide them and ultimately help them feel comfortable. So 100% constant, consistent communication, all the difference in the world. What about the fourth principle? Take us to that.
Yeah. So fourth, I would say confident control. So I try my best to stay in control of the situation. I will say I'm not asking them a lot of approval questions at this point in the process, because I think they've hired me to do my thing, and do what I'm good at and what they see online and what they've seen in my portfolio. That's not to say that they don't get a say in anything. They definitely get a say. They get a say in where we're doing the session, what they wear. I give them
Ashley's
tips.
Such a control freak. What is going on here?
No, I hope no one thinks that.
I'm playing with you.
But up until this point, everything's been suggestions, so they can choose to take it or not, and I will do what I can with it. But at the session, they don't want to think, nobody wants to think at that point. Like, again, and like you said, they're not models. Like, when I've been in front of the camera, and we're about to get our photos done again soon this summer, I am like, I need someone to tell me what to do. Like, I do this for a living. I know how to pose people where it's flattering, but when you're there, you don't know what looks good from the other person's perspective. You don't know what looks good in terms of light or location or any of that. Like, even as a photographer, when you're on the other side, all you can think about is like, does my face look weird? Like, you know, am I standing funny? Like, does this look good? And so that is where I think it's our responsibility as photographers to take confident control. And again, I don't know if control is the right word, but a confident lead in that I'm not asking them unless they have expressed prior that they want to have a large say in things. I am explaining to them what I'm doing. I am sometimes explaining why, if I feel like they're the kind of couple or they're the kind of person that would love an explanation. You know, I'll explain, we're going to head over here. The light is amazing at this time. That spot's better right at sunset, or things like that. I'm explaining little things that will help reaffirm that I know what I'm talking about, so they can trust me. Yep. Again, that trust ladder, like we just keep moving on up. And I am guiding them so they don't have to think through it, because again, they're not paying to make decisions. They're paying to get pretty photos and have a good experience while they're doing it. And I know for me, like, unless you are a really, really big control freak, people like to be spoiled. And I feel like it's almost a version of being spoiled of like, who doesn't love like getting taken out on a date where you don't have to think about anything? Yep. They just take you to your favorite places. You have a great time, you know, like, or a vacation. Like you don't want to have to plan every second. I just would love to show up and have someone be like, these are all the amazing fun things we're doing. Yep. So that's what I want a session to be like. I want it to be like, I am their guide. That's probably a better word, not control.
A confident guide.
Confident
that's good.
Guide.
Yeah, no, that's really, and you put that a really great way, I think, too, where they can kind of give up any responsibility of performing in any particular way, and you're just confidently guiding them along. I would love that. I mean, I would love to just be, there is, like you're describing, like a sense of being taken care of, right? Where you don't have to shoulder the responsibility of that particular moment. You, Ashley, the photographer, you are guiding them along. I think that's a really great recommendation. This has been really helpful, really practical. And I like it too, because it's driven by principle. You and I were talking about this before we hit the record button. It'd be really easy for you to just throw out a few tips and tricks and, you know, almost like candy for our listeners to consume. And then they go and they do those things, but then they don't know what's underneath all of that. I love that you share principles that they can then apply in their own special way to their business. This has been really good stuff. You mentioned earlier that you've got a podcast that you're in the process of launching. Will you just share about that briefly with our listeners?
Yes. So I am in the process of launching a podcast with another hybrid photographer. Her name is Christine Herman. Okay. And we are launching a podcast called Dare to Develop for photographers, wedding industry professionals, and creatives. Our whole about is surrounded with daring and developing. So daring to take risks in your business and do awesome things, and developing community, because it really is a lonely world a lot of the times in this wedding industry and the creative entrepreneur industry. And so Christine and I, each with our own businesses, wanted to come together and just really create a space for creatives to learn from other creatives who have either dared to do something or developed something amazing, developed courageously in their business and in their communities. So we are launching that soon, which will be Q2 of 2020 for whenever anyone's listening. And we are very excited. We have a lot of amazing industry professionals lined up who we will be interviewing and hearing about how they did that in their business, as well as talking about some daring and developing things we've done in our own businesses as well.
And they're going to be able to find that. I mean, first of all, the website, just shout out to the podcast, daretodeveloppodcast.com. We'll put that in the show notes. And then will this be out on kind of all the podcast platforms or apps rather?
It'll be on the iTunes podcast and wherever else you can find a podcast.
Yeah, that's good. I know as podcasts have become more popular, I've heard about various podcasts from different people, and I go to look them up on, like, the one that I use most commonly is called Pocket Casts. Okay. And I'm like, I can't find the podcast in here. I think some podcasters are pushing it out to Apple and then maybe kind of stopping there, that kind of thing. So I'm glad that it's going to be out on all the platforms. Yes. And of course, we'll link to, again, the website and probably at least one of those platforms in the show notes at bokehpodcast.com for anybody who's curious. And then remind us again of your photography site and social media so our listeners can follow you.
Yeah, thank you. So my business is just my name. It's ashleybaumgartner.com is the website, BAUMGARTNER. Ashley, the normal way I like to say. And my Instagram is Ash Baumgartner. Ashley Baumgartner was taken, so we went with the nickname, but Ash Baumgartner. And then Ash Baumgartner is most of my social media across the board. So Facebook and Pinterest and think even a TikTok, but I don't know what I'm doing over there. And all the fun things. And then I actually didn't have a chance to mention, but I have a small shop associated with the wedding calligraphy side of my business that I launched this year as well, called the Baum Shop, BAUM, like my last name.
That's cool.
And that is tanks and mugs for brides to be, which has been a fun little side project as well. So some little gifty things. I've had some photographers buy them as like client gifts, which has been really fun too, to see how other photographers are sharing it with their clients as well.
And that, I mean, I know I'm seeing it on your regular site. Is there a separate site for that as well?
It's an Etsy shop, so you can search Ash Baumgartner or the Baum Shop on Etsy, and it'll come up.
Cool. We'll put that in the show notes too. Thank you again, Ashley, for hanging out with me today. This has been a lot of fun.
Yes, thank you so much, Nathan. It's been such a treat to be on the Bokeh Podcast.
Thank you so much for listening to the Bokeh Podcast. Will you let us know what you thought by leaving a review of the podcast in the Apple Podcast app? And I'd love to hear from you personally with your thoughts about the podcast and suggestions about future topics and guests for the show. My email is nathan@photographersedit.com. The Bokeh Podcast is brought to you by Milu, the simplest way for photographers and coordinators to collaborate on shot lists and timelines for weddings, parties, and other amazing events. Visit Milu, MIILU.com. This podcast is also brought to you by Photographer's Edit, custom image editing for the professional photographer. Visit photographersedit.com.